In this video, I'm validating the Next.js Pages architecture in a node-based Azure App Services deployment. This has been requested a few times, so I wanted to do it, wanted to deploy to Azure App Services and see how well it supports Next.js features. Next.js can be self-hosted on any node-based server, so that's what we're going to give a try today. We're going to try out on a basic node server. So what's the Next.js app that I've built that I'm going to be testing? I've built a Next.js Pages architecture app running Next.js 13.4.16 that tests every important feature of Next.js. I've got 13 different features being tested, from getStaticProps to getServerSideProps, on-demand incremental static regeneration, API routes, image optimization, and more. So that's what I want to test out today. How well does Azure App Services in a node-based environment support all these important features of Next.js? So let's talk a little bit about the deployment that I'll be doing. I'm doing a local deployment to Azure App Services through the VS Code extension. I know that probably doesn't sound like what you're going to be doing for production. I've tried my best to get the GitHub Actions working to deploy to Azure App Services. I could not get it to work. I couldn't even do it with the Create Next app, the most basic Next.js app. Kept running into just application error. My deploy would work, but it would just run into application error. Not a whole lot of helpful error messages there, so I ended up following this video. I'll have it linked in the description below of how to deploy via the VS Code extension. And I'm just using the free tier of Azure. I don't want to pay for this. Hey, this is me for the future. We're actually going to be using the basic tier, not the free tier. Free tier I could not get to work, it just kept timing out. So we're on the basic tier, and it's a Linux deployment as well if I didn't mention that. So basic tier, Linux, Node 18, that's what we're working with. And I want to clarify with what this is going to be a test of. This is just a test of, do these Next.js features work, yes or no? I really don't want to get into the performance, scalability, or even security of these different features in Azure App Services, because honestly, I am not recommending Azure App Services. People have asked me to run this test, so I want to run it, and I do want to get the results, but I am not recommending you host your Next.js or any node-based application on Azure App Services. There is so much more added complexity to get the security, scalability, and performance in Azure App Services. You can debate me on pricing, you can debate me on this, but I think that Vercel and Netlify are the best places to take your Next.js application to be able to host it efficiently, securely, and be able to scale. I'm on their free tier, hobby tier, and I have numerous apps there. I know that they have different, I know it can get expensive if you're working with different pro or enterprise plans, but Vercel and Netlify are going to offer you the best solutions for hosting your Next.js applications. With that out of the way, let's get the application deployed to Azure App Services in a Node 18 environment and see how well it supports Next.js features. So here's my application in VS Code, and I have the Azure extension installed. I'm on the pay-as-you-go, and you can see all of my different Azure App Services in here. So this is, if we look at the extensions, the Azure App Service extension. And this is what I've installed to deploy my application because it worked. Again, this probably isn't how you're going to be doing in production, but this gets my local deployment out to Azure App Services so I can test it. So what we want to do here is we can see that I have the Next.js app. This is my Create Next app that I finally got working. So I did test this out yesterday with at least that Create Next app. I have not deployed this application, so let's give it a try. So I've had 2 deployments fail now on the free tier of Azure App Services. And of course, it just gives me deployment failed or operation timed out. It's really not been helpful so far. So what I am going to try is going to the basic tier. Maybe that's the problem, that it's the shared resources, or because it's taking forever to even build the application. This is a very simple application. So let's try out the basic tier and see what we get back. Hopefully we get better results. So my basic tier web app is now being created, the basic Next.js host check. Let's see what results we get back with this one. So our web app was created, and now let's deploy. And let's see, deploying basic web app. It's going to be deploying, hopefully, it didn't ask me this time, but hopefully it's deploying the Next.js Every Feature Pages app that we have here in this repo. I'm going to pause here and we'll see what happens, but hopefully with the basic tier, we get better results. That free tier just really wasn't working out for us. Phew. Okay, so that did deploy, and it took, oh boy, let's see, finished at 3:15, started at, let's just say over 15 minutes to build and deploy that application on a basic Azure App Services but we did finally get it to deploy, and our site is visible. But here's my application. I can click on the pages. We're seeing different things working. getServerSideProps is working there as well. But we don't want to, again, test this manually. We want to use those Cypress tests that I've written. So let's get the Cypress test pointed at this endpoint, run them against this, and see what we get back, what kind of results we get back for Next.js feature support in Azure App Services. Heading into the repo, we can go to our Cypress config, and we want to change our environment variable to point to the correct URL. Now that we're pointing at the correct URL, let's hit up the terminal and open up the Cypress console. With this opening up, we'll go to our EDE tests and run these inside of Chrome. We've got 13 tests right here. We can see all the different features that we're testing. Let's run all 13 and check out the results. So everything seems to be working here except for incremental static regeneration. So let's look at this test. So when we come in, we can assert that we're getting Zangoose. That's a cool looking Pokemon. And what we are expecting is to get that same Pokemon back when we refresh, and then after a second refresh, getting a new one. But it looks like we're getting, instead of Poliwrath is not equal Zangoose. I haven't figured out a better way of testing this, but it gets that whole text in there. But essentially getting Poliwrath, but it's getting Zungoose when it shouldn't be. So let's check out this in the live version. So we have incremental static regeneration, and what I'm seeing probably here, let's see, if I refresh Zatu, I am seeing it looks like refreshing. I think this is an issue, and it was brought up in the past. I believe my incremental static regeneration might not, 3 seconds for this is not necessarily a real valid number to be testing. Oh boy, but I don't want to go through another deployment. So let me, but see, it's like, if I refresh, sometimes it's not like, so I'm going to refresh, and you'd expect it to still give you that old Pokemon back, then be rebuilding in the background and giving you a new one. It seems like it's almost just doing SSR, where it's just giving me a new one every time. So if I refresh really quickly, it gets me the same one, but then I get a new one. So if I wait 3 seconds, refresh, got the same one, refresh again, and I'm getting new ones. Oh man, this is inconsistent. I'm going to say this is inconsistent. I'm not going to say it's failing here, but it's inconsistent here with the results here of incremental static regeneration with Next.js. But I don't want to dock it too many points because it's just a little funky. Then I think this might have to do with 3 seconds isn't a reasonable time. So if we look at the code, we'll go to the feature here. You see that my revalidate is set to 3 seconds. I should probably up this to a more reasonable value. But I don't want to do that quite yet because it's going to make me redeploy, and I don't want to deal with another 20-minute deploy to Azure App Services. And either way, I'm still not recommending Azure App Services. Even if ISR is working, I'm still not going to be recommending it. What I'll put in my report is I'll just say inconsistent, and because I have seen the 3 seconds work on other sites consistently, but it's not happening here. But otherwise, we're seeing all the other features work. We have middleware support, on-demand ISR, Next.js config redirects, and this is expected. This is just a simple Node server. Next.js runs great on Node, and this is a simple Node server in Azure App Services, but you're missing out on a lot of those great features that Vercel and Netlify give you, like instant rollbacks, the much faster build times, the serverless deployments so that you're distributed, you get the CDN built in, DDoS protection built in, a lot of security built in, and it's just so much simpler to hook up to your GitHub deployments. I could not get that working in Azure App Services, but I am no Azure expert, but it is simple in Vercel and Netlify. Here's all the features that work and are supported by Next.js. Here are all the features on screen that are supported. I'll have that little, just a small asterisk next to ISR because I couldn't get reasonable results there. I got inconsistent results. But again, Azure App Services, does it support Next.js? I'm going to say yes because I don't want to ding it right now for the ISR support. So I'm going to say yes, it does support it, but it's not my recommendation. You might be able to debate me on the pricing. You might be an Azure expert and you love it. but I'm still going to be pushing Vercel and Netlify for Next.js. So a couple people have asked me for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was useful to you. If it was, please leave a like and make sure to subscribe to keep up with future updates and other hosting platforms that I'm going to be checking. With that, thanks.